Hello and welcome back to Seconds Out. My name is Eamon Khan. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined once again by Hall of Fame writer, the incomparable Thomas Hauser, for the first time this year. Thomas, I know that you've been recovering, but you look like you're doing well heading into this new year. How are you doing, sir?
Always nice to be with you. I had arthroscopic knee surgery 2 weeks ago, and it's what they call minor surgery, although, as Bill Walton, the famed basketball player, once said, it's minor surgery when it's someone else's knee. That said, everything is going well.
So when are you back in the ring?
Well, they're taking it in steps. First, I have to be kicking field goals. I don't think I'll be ready by the Super Bowl. Be set to participate in time for the World Cup. I'm taking it cautiously.
Taking it cautiously indeed. But nonetheless, great to be speaking to you once again. And I want to jump straight into the hot topic so far, the announcement that caught many by surprise, and I'm one of those that was caught by surprise and a little bit of confusion by this announcement, that being anti-Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. I remember the previous conversation we had, and you said that that anti-Joshua's win over Ottawa and sort of paved the way for him to potentially fight Ngannou, and that confused me in the sense because given some of the words that AJ said about his desires to reclaim titles, Ngannou doesn't really factor into that picture. So did you share the same confusion or surprise that I had and some had in the industry when that fight was announced?
Not at all. And as you just said, when we spoke last, I said that I would not be surprised if Anthony fought Ngannou next. Now, fighters talk about doing things for the fans. Fighters talk about wanting belts, but at the end, they're fighting for money. And this is the big money fight for AJ. I assume that he wins it fairly easily, although I also assume that Tyson Fury would beat Ngannou fairly easily. We can talk a bit more about how confusing the heavyweights are these days. But this is a big money fight for AJ. I assume he wins it, and then that paves the way for his next fight, either against Tyson Fury or against Hrgovic for the IBF title, if that comes to pass. So he's positioned very well, and his next fight will be for a lot of money. And quite frankly, despite what happened in Fury and Ngannou, I look for a fairly dominant, not fair, I look for a dominant performance for Joshua. If he fights cautiously, he wins the decision. If he uh, goes for it, I think he gets the knockout. I've been wrong before, but that's what I think this time.
I appreciate you putting your neck on the line in terms of how the fight breaks down with the winner and the outcome. But does any of what Ngannou was able to display against Fury give you any doubts to that outcome that you believe will happen?
Ngannou Fury was a very confusing fight. Look, I start with the position that you can't just walk into professional boxing. If somebody is a really good dancer in clubs and discotheques, he or she can't just walk on stage and star in a ballet. It's a different set of skills. Now, if you're asking me, what went wrong from Tyson's point of view in Fury and Ngannou, first, he fought like a man who hadn't trained at all. Certainly there were reports before the fight that he was not in the gym, that he was drinking heavily. I wasn't there. I don't know if those reports are true or not. I know that he looked awful. And then the other thing, which was a factor, is one of Tyson's biggest weapons in the ring is his size. He is able to wear men down by leaning on them, tugging on them, pulling on them. And he didn't really have that advantage against Ngannou because Ngannou was as big and physically strong as he was. Now, having said that, I believe if Tyson had trained properly, he would have been able to outbox him fairly easily. That didn't happen. So now we're left with the question, what happens when AJ fights Ngannou? AJ will certainly train seriously for this fight. He's been put on notice as a consequence of Fury and Ngannou. And look, I still don't think somebody can just walk in from MMA and compete at the highest levels of professional boxing. So unless proven wrong, I'll go with Joshua in this fight. I think he wins it convincingly. I won't say easily because nothing is easy in boxing, but I think it's a dominant performance and a dominant win for him.
Just to play with it slightly, given the potential outcome that Ngannou could shock the world again to a degree and could get his hand raised against Anthony Joshua, what would that say about this era of the heavyweight division and this era compared to other eras if that were to happen on March 8th?
It would say one of two things: either that Ngannou, one of the most extraordinary martial arts combatants of our generation, and being able to do that, or it would say that today's heavyweights really aren't that good. It's a very confusing heavyweight picture right now. Uh, People who thought Deontay Wilder was the real thing, you know, watched him go in against Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker was knocked out by Joe Joyce. Joseph Parker lost to Joshua and Dillian White. And yet Parker dominated Wilder from beginning to end. Wilder looked like he'd worn an 80-pound costume for his ring walk and his water bottle was spiked. I'm not suggesting either of those were true, but it was astonishing to me how bad Wilder looked. It was astonishing to me how bad Fury looked against Ngannou. AJ, of course, has been disappointing, in recent outings. Look, do I think this era is better than the era when Bruno, Seldon, and Botha had the heavyweight belts? Yes, I do. But we're certainly not talking about Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, or Larry Holmes. And I think either Klitschko would have dominated these guys at their peak. Not at the end of their careers, but at their peak.
I was also surprised, and I saw that some of the heavyweights in the division who are also jockeying for position and putting themselves in positions to fight the undisputed winner once the rematch clause has taken place, if it does take place. But the Saudi direction seems to be that they're looking to maneuver the winner of AJ Ngannou towards the undisputed winner. There will be a lot of heavyweights that aren't happy with that decision and direction there.
Yeah, look, money talks. We've seen that. I don't know what happens if Joshua beats Ngannou. There is a rematch clause, for Fury-Usyk 2. We don't even know for sure that Fury-Usyk 1 is going to take place. It's a very confusing situation. We're still waiting for the first unified, undisputed heavyweight champion in more than 20 years. We just have to wait and watch it all unfold. But all of today's major heavyweights have been flawed to a greater extent than great fighters in the past have been flawed. We can just sit back and watch that it all sorts itself out over time.
Just making sure I haven't missed anything. You're saying that you're not certain if Fury-Usyk does happen. Have you heard anything on the grapevine?
I've heard nothing on the grapevine that would indicate it wouldn't happen. It's scheduled, what is it, for February 17th? So no, I haven't heard that it isn't going to happen, but it hasn't happened so far. So I hope it does. Boxing needs that clarity, and also it'll be an interesting fight. But everything seems up in the air these days, and at the whim of the Saudis. This fight is less than 4 weeks away, and we still don't know whether it's going to be on DAZN or pay-per-view or ESPN Plus in the United States. We don't know if it will be on pay-per-view in the United States. The assumption is that it will be. You look at Joshua and Ngannou, that fight is taking place on a Friday afternoon in the United States. Now, that tells us a couple of things, including number one, the United States market doesn't seem to be very important to the Saudis or the heavyweight picture these days. And to the extent that this is all part of Saudi sport washing, those efforts are not aimed at the United States so much as it's aimed at other parts of the world.
Mhm. Now, I'm certainly not looking to pitch you and Eddie Hearn in a back and forth, but in our last conversation, Eddie didn't take too kindly to some of the comments you made regarding Otto Wallen as the opponent. Although some journalists have agreed with you and others in the sport to agree with you to say that Otto Wallen wasn't what he was deemed out to be. But um, I don't know if you had a chance to see that from Eddie. Were you expecting a bit of backlash after having criticized the matchup between Joshua and Wallen?
I have better things to do with my listen to everything that Eddie Hearn says. Eddie is fairly predictable. Every fight one of his fighters has, he predicts this man's going to win by a knockout. All of his fight cards are massive, historic, blockbuster events. Eddie says what he says. He's very contradictory in what he says. If Eddie would like to sit down with me, man to man, just get a camera rolling and let the two of us talk with each other for an hour to discuss these issues and sort things out, I'd love to do it. We can do it on your show. I doubt very much that Eddie will do that.
I will be personally putting that towards Eddie Hearn myself, Thomas, and if I can make it happen to any degree, I'll do everything I can. So hang fire on that one, but we'll have to put that towards Eddie Hearn. Just moving forward, Thomas, does this
Just to
5 versus 5?
make this very clear, just Eddie and myself filmed and videoed from the very beginning, just the two of us, free exchange of ideas. In fact, we can make it 2 hours. That's even better. Just to discuss some of the issues that we've seen eye to eye on and some of the issues we've been at odds on. I'd be very happy to do that. Might be very clarifying for a lot of people.
I agree with that sentiment as well. Moving forward, does the 5 versus 5 Hearn versus Warren particularly appeal to you? Given that the Saudis have been able to, and Eddie said it himself, that maybe it is down to just the pound note, unite these two factions towards maybe a better purpose for boxing, bringing those promoters together to make better fights. Does that appeal to you?
Well, the idea of having good fights with the best fighting the best appeals to me.
Hmm.
Uh, I really don't care, and I don't think boxing fans care whether a fighter is promoted by Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn or Al Heyman or Top Rank. That's not what this is about. When yeah, Fury fights Usyk, nobody is going to say, "Oh my God, it's Frank Warren against." That's not what it's about. So yeah, is it a possible marketing ploy? Yeah, and maybe that would appeal to some hardcore. Appeal to me, and it certainly doesn't resonate with the general public, most of whom have no idea who Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn are. Boxing people know who Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn are. Certainly in the United States, I could walk into Times Square and ask 50 people, do you know who they are? And I'd be very surprised if more than one or two knew. That's not to overlook their contributions and their place in boxing today. But we're in a very, very small universe here. And let's focus on the fights, not the promoters.
Focus on the fights. I just wanted to know your thoughts on last weekend's action. I was there myself, and whenever these things tend to happen, it usually brings the spotlight and scope onto judging. But specifically in the UK, it's felt by some, especially some hardcore fans, where in the result of Jonas versus Maia, with Jonas getting the nod against Maia, that fighters who aren't from the UK are coming over, it's very tough for them to get decisions, get the nod from the judges' scorecards. And we're sort of like how Germany or some European countries used to be in the past, where our fighters would go over and not get decisions where it was warranted. Do you feel that's the case now? And do you feel there's a caution or cautions to be heeded by fighters coming over to the UK that, look, if you don't knock out your opponent, you're not going to get the the result on the scorecard here?
I didn't see the fight, so I can't comment on the scorecards. What I will say is that hometown judging has been a problem in boxing for a long time. It's not just the UK. It's wrong. To me, the bigger problem in women's boxing today is that too often championships are being given out like trinkets from a gumball machine. Uh, there are so many championships. I mean, when somebody like Ebony Bridges can call herself a world champion, that to me is silly. Now, that's not to demean the fact that Ebony Bridges goes in there and tries as hard as she can. I respect that. She's a fighter, but she's not a world championship fighter. Sky Nicholson, in my personal view, has done nothing to warrant a world championship fight. I don't know who she's fighting. I don't know if this is a setup fight or not. Certainly, Eddie Hearn has shown a great interest in Sky Nicholson and maneuvered her very well. But to me, when you have all these women's championships and fighters who clearly do not deserve it are being called world champions, that to me is demeaning to the true women's champions like Katie Taylor, like Teresa Shields, who are serious fighters, who take their trade seriously, who have advanced the sport in many, many ways. And to lump them together just confuses the public, and it makes it harder to advance women's boxing.
I'm running out to the end of my questions, Thomas. So I just wanted to let you take the open stand here. Just on the current state of boxing, you feel we're in 2024, a new year. We're hoping for prosperity, for opportunity for more boxers to, get what they deserve in the ring and outside the ring too. But what do you feel is the current state of boxing in the year where we've had some great fights towards throughout the year of 2023, but we're waiting for more in 2024?
Well, first, I look at things from the perspective of the United States, and boxing is certainly suffering in the United States. It's much more popular in the UK and some other parts of the world. But when people talk about 2023 having been a great year for boxing, I don't think so.
Hmm.
So at all, because most of the fights that people wanted to see were behind a paywall.
Hmm.
And in the United States, at least, very few people saw them. And again, the fact that Joshua Ngannou is being contested on a Friday afternoon, a work day in the United States, not even the evening, in the afternoon, tells you where that fight registers in the United States today. So you have to get into the mainstream, and I think you do that through the best fighting the best, but also by having fights that are available without being behind a paywall. That's how you grow the sport. Now, there's a lot of Saudi money coming into the sport now. A handful of promoters, a handful of fighters are going to get rich on that. But I don't know that it's growing the sport. You're preaching to the choir. Yeah, the people who are writing about boxing and your hardcore fans might say, wow, these fights are happening, but it's not growing to the sport. You're preaching to the choir.
Thomas, a real pleasure to speak to you once again. Hopefully, we're looking for more throughout 2024. Wishing you good health as well. Hopefully, we get some of those good fights that we want to see this year. But the pleasure is all mine. And once again, thank you so much for speaking to Seconds Out, sir.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.